All right, let's go ahead and get underway. So today we're going to be showing KeyShot 3.2 and specifically how to do some animation on this Viper. We're going to show some material templates and just basically all the new stuff that is in 3.2, which can be seen here on our forum post for the latest. And if you don't have 3.2, you can get it here. So this is on the forum, under your software updates, latest version. You have to be logged in to see these paths. And then, of course, you can always go to KeyShot.com and get the latest from, where do we keep that? Here, under resources, downloads, updates, and there's your 3.2. So if you don't have it, definitely check it out. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at what kind of animation. By the way, my name is Jeff McCartney, and I don't have anyone answering questions today, but I will be keeping an eye on them. So if you have a question that something that you didn't quite catch, please submit to the questions, and I have a second screen up that I'm keeping an eye on for those. And at the end of the webinar, the bulk of this webinar should be pretty quick, and then at the end we'll have some time to just address your questions. Okay, so the animation we're going to be looking at is basically how to control what you see here. So it's just, I'm going to try to play it kind of manually so that it comes through the webinar a little bit better. All right, so the door's opened and then the wheels are turning there. All right. One thing I can do here to make that playback a little smoother is use performance mode. It's going to be Alt-P. And any hotkey that I use can always be referenced from the hotkey menu by pressing the K key. You'd see that hotkey menu. And you can also pull that up from under Help, Hotkeys Overview. So there you go. It's a good reference sheet there. All right, so let's look at this one more time. Doors open. And then the doors close. We're going to be using the mirror function to do that. And then the wheels turn back again. So that kind of poses my wheels. A lot of the times when you're doing a car rendering, you don't want the wheels to be perfectly straight. So the animation system is actually a good way to turn things, and you can always kind of fine-tune with the positioning of those turned wheels just by scrolling through the animation. So my point here is the animation actually doesn't have to be used entirely for animation. You can use it to move things, which of course you have the move tool as well, but I will show some reasons why the animation system can actually be a little more helpful than the move tool. All right, let's back out of this file here and just start with the raw Viper file. I'm going to open up my KeyShot 3.2 and just drag in my raw BIP here. The reason I'm starting with a BIP is because this is a fairly large file, and I just don't want to have you all sitting here waiting for it to import. Okay, so here we are, nice raw file. Now let's put animation on hold for a bit and talk about material templates, just kind of skipping ahead. And that's because I want to get this thing painted up. So a material template, for those that are still new to them, were introduced in 3.1 in sort of an experimental way and are greatly improved in 3.2. They're accessed under Edit, Material Templates. They have their own little menu here. And what they do is they create a little source destination link that looks at the default names of either the parts or the materials in your file as seen in the scene tree, and then it links up a material from the library or a custom material to that part automatically. So for example, we have this, well, this is the wrong template, this is for my dirt bike. So let's go to Viper here. For example, we have body. If we look at this item in the material templates, we see source type is set to material. That means this template item here is going to look for stuff called body that has a material that includes the word body in the default material name. So any model that comes in that has default materials, and in the name of that default material, body is included, it'll apply paint metallic white. And these asterisks allow it to have not just body. It doesn't have to be exactly, the material doesn't have to be body, it can be anything. These are wildcards. So for example, let's click on the blue surface here, and we see over here from this Maya file, we have this really long default material name under the material column here. And it gets the word body right here. So when I apply this, it's going to detect that and then apply my white paint. Let's look at some of these other ones before we actually apply it. Click here, and you see this default material is called composite. That's going to get my black paint. And you have glass up here for our glass, and some other ones for getting the rims. Now the way this is made is you can just add items here and type in a source, test, and then type in a destination. And you'll see when you start entering anything into the destination, it pulls up automatically materials from your library. So if I start typing the word paint, you see it's starting to narrow down to various paints. Let's say I want red, and I add red, and it gets me all of the red, anything that includes paint and red, and then we can say metallic. And there's all my metallic reds that I can pick from, and I just click one. So that's how you create an item. Well, let's go ahead and apply this. So we see how this is constructed. We see we have wildcards to pick up materials, and all we have to do now is click Apply Template. And then that goes through and finds all those materials. So you can have in your modeling software default materials that you use when you know it's going to need to be a certain material in KeyShot. And then when you actually open the file, when you import the file, you'll see if I were to just take this file here and import it, I'm going to go ahead and actually import this right into the same scene here. There's actually one subtle little improvement here that you might notice from 3.1 as well. This didn't even quite make it into the what's new. What you see here is when importing a BIP file, you actually have another coordinates option called Keep Original. This will make it so that it doesn't scale your BIP file at all. It's not going to use whatever scale this had applied. It's not going to use some automatic scale. It's just going, whatever that BIP file scale was, it's going to use that. All right, so we're going to enable that on this. And then under Advanced, this is where you can apply this material template. You're going to go to Use Material Template, select Viper, and I'm adding this to scene so that I'm going to have two Vipers. And you might have noted I'm starting with that raw BIP again. So when this imports, if this was 3.1, or if you didn't have material templates, this would come in, this raw BIP, Viper raw.bip, would come in without any materials assigned. But if all goes to plan here, we will get our materials automatically assigned. And there you go. So now I have two of these Vipers. I'm going to just move one here. Just put that over there. And they got their materials automatically assigned. All right, let's get rid of this one so we don't need a duplicate. There we go. All right. Now there's another way to do this, another way to create material templates. This one I just created manually because I just wanted it to get the basic overall colors. But the other way you can do it is I go in here and I just apply, even if I just apply some random stuff, let's make it a little less strange looking. Okay, so we now have hammered metal on the outside here and sort of this blue anodized metal on the inside. If I click the plus button on material templates, and I'll give it a new one, Viper 2, what it does is automatically populates your template with what it sees applied to your parts here. So now when I bring back in this Viper, it'll get this same material application. Generally though, if you want to set up like a nice clean workflow, you can just do sort of like what I did here with the Viper and just do the basics, because there's going to be, as you're making different products, there's going to be parts that are custom, but there's going to be some overlap with other materials you might use. So, go in there and anything that's consistently used, make a template for that. But if you use the automatic template creation method, it almost creates a template that's a little too specific to that one model. It might work well for other models, but you just kind of have to play with both options. You can always, of course, after you create one here, you can go in here and clean it up. You can edit these things. If I want this to actually be, again, red paint, you can do that. You can change the source name. You can change the method, the type here. So it's really up to you. All right, so I'm going to get rid of that one. I'm just going to show another quick example of a cool thing you can do with material templates by bringing open the dirt bike here that I have. All right, and while this is opening, I have a quick question from Bill G. Is material callout applied at the native CAD level? What I guess you're asking about is, is it detecting from the CAD level the name of the materials, and if that's what you mean, different CAD software interact with it differently. In your case, you use SolidWorks mostly, so what you're going to see out of SolidWorks are names of materials called, color, colon, some other than 3 numbers describing the RGB. So for that, what you can actually do, and let me just take a little detour here. Just going to leave the dirt bike open there. And maybe SolidWorks will decide to open. There we are. All right. So I'll just do a quick example here of how it interacts with direct imports from a CAD software like SolidWorks. All right, so let's just do 2 bodies. We'll extrude those. And we'll make this one some specific green value. And then the other one, some specific blue value. All right, save that out here. Webinar, colors test. And I'm going to open up a new session of my KeyShot there. Just drop that in. All right, so, well, there is that. Okay. Hold on 1 second there. I have to import that correctly or use my different naming convention there. See, this is the problem. So the reason that those colors didn't come in is because I had this new importer checked. Let's disable that, and then we got the right colors. So that's that's why it's beta. Doesn't support body colors yet. All right, so let's take a look at the default names here. So we have this in SolidWorks this material didn't really have a name to begin with. There are appearances in SolidWorks that have names. KeyShot doesn't support them. It just looks at the color. So, basically I have a material RGB value there, material RGB. So this green one has 255 for the green part of RGB and 255 for the blue one on the blue part. So I can make a template now. This one's easy enough where I'll just put aluminum brushed here and anodized black here, and then material templates. And you see it automatically populates those two materials with those two default materials with those two library materials, and I can always edit them, of course. And now, when I import that again, so colors test, drag and drop that in there, advanced, use material template, and I'm going to select SW test, and there it goes, and it applies those. So it's looking, each modeling software gives KeyShot a slightly different naming convention. A lot of the sort of solid body type modeling softwares like SolidWorks, we expose the color information in that material RGB format. So you can base templates on that. But of course, you can also base templates on the part name. So you see here, I can change this to part mode, and I can then tell it to apply to anything that's called colors test. But what I can also, in this simple file, basically everything's the same name. So, the template would be very boring. But within assembly, we of course do support all of the subpart names and subassembly names and things like that. So you can create templates based on that, based on the assembly structure. And it'll support, if you can make a template for a whole subassembly, and then within that subassembly you can make templates you can make template items for each part within that subassembly, and so on. And then within parts you can then go into materials. So you can get really crazy with it. All right, let's get back on track. One last thing about material templates. We have this dirt bike here. So something kind of cool you can do with it is, so I have this dirt bike, right? It's kind of boring, all gray. What I've done is prepared 3 different material templates that have been customized based on the part. So you can see here all of these are set to part mode, because with this file, my parts were kind of what gave me the right sort of description. So I have like, air scoop. It's a nice way to create this template for this specific Creo file. But what I have here, they're basically all the same template. They're just different colors. So I can apply. And I have a blue bike. Now I have a green bike. And now I have a red bike. So it's almost like just a quick way to create variants of your model without having to duplicate the model, customize the material. You can just kind of switch between. You can leave this menu open and just switch between all day. If you're doing a design review, make a couple templates to show different combinations. Especially if you don't have a lot of hardware, especially RAM, and you're weary of large files, and you don't want to be duplicating or running multiple sessions of KeyShot. This is kind of a cool way to just show variants. And of course, this can get further customized. Let's say the green one. Maybe we can look at where this is coming from. So this is the side panel part. So we can go here, and maybe the green will look better with a black paint. So just put in paint gloss black, and now when I apply, my green one puts black there, while maybe the blue one continues to put white. It's just a nice little feature there. All right, so that about does it for material templates. One little question about that: are there any existing material templates that can be downloaded or bought? Well, material templates in their nature are very specific to your own files, so we don't have any ones that are prepared for you. Yeah, so there you go. So no is the answer to that. Let's take a look here. I'm going to get rid of SolidWorks, and let's get back to our Viper. So again, we're going to animate now. So I'm going to open up the raw, and to make it look nice, after it opens, we're going to apply a quick template. All right, there's my template for Viper. There it is. Apply. That doesn't ping everything, but it definitely makes it look a little nicer than the default. Okay. And something that we're going to cover at the end of this is really lighting this really well in a real life environment. So if you're kind of bored with what I'm showing now, there's exciting lighting happening at the end. All right. So animation. What we're going to do is open the doors first. So let's look at the way we've built this. Have a door. And we have a part called left door. And I'll be honest with you, that's not what it came in as. It came in as VCX something something something. So I just renamed it while I was preparing the file to left door so I can more easily pick it out of the group. Of course, when I click here in the real-time window, it jumps to the correct level of the assembly anyways, but it just kind of helps keep things organized. I'm going to use performance mode while I'm working here, even though I'm on a 24-core system. Performance mode is still nice. So left door, we can do a couple of things. We can go to the animation window or the timeline. We can use the animation wizard. We can set it to rotation, and we can expand this down to left door. But that's sort of the novice, easy way to do it. Well, it's kind of the guided way to do it. It's actually, in my opinion, very, very much easier to just, click a part here in real time, find it in the scene tree, select the level up. So when I click on the door skin here, it goes to the bottom level part. So I'm just manually going up basically one level to this to the group that includes the whole door assembly. And on that level, I'm going to right click and say add rotation. So the wizard is good when you're just starting out and you need a little guidance, but the scene tree is much faster. All right, so we're scrolling through our animation now. We're looking at what it's doing, and it's not doing what we want. So the first thing we need to do is change the axis. So by clicking here, if you have some selection here in the scene tree, and then you go over to the timeline, animation timeline, and you click the animation, it selects that animation to the animation tab. Y is the up direction in KeyShot, so it would just be a good idea to change this over to Y. Now, of course, Y can be, there's two different sort of coordinate systems in KeyShot. There's the local to your model, and then there's the global. In global, Y is always up. But if you're working from like 3D Studio Max or something, Z is often up. And so in that case, when your axis orientation here is set to original local, the up direction, the correct up direction would be the Z axis. But in our case, that's not the case. So basically the original local and global don't show any difference for this file. All right. Now the trickiest thing in animation, in any animation system, is getting the pivot point correct. So back in Maya, what I did to help with that is place a little block here. And you see that is, so I have my whole Viper grouped up here, and then I have two cubes that I've positioned right where they need to be, well, at least where I think they need to be. I haven't actually, we don't have real geometry in there to show where the hinges are, but, kind of close enough for our purposes. So this cube, P cube 2, let's remember that. We could always rename it. Let's call this, let's rename this to driver door helper. We'll just call it helper. Yeah, that works. All right. So now we're going to click our animation. We have a rotation here. So any rotation animation has a pivot point helper object selection. And right now it's set to self. That means it's rotating around its own center point. You can always try going to the origin, see if that's any different. But you see what that's doing is using the origin of the entire model. So, the origin's kind of in the center here, and as we rotate that around, you can see it's rotating around that center. So, we have to go and customize our helper object because the center doesn't work and the origin doesn't work. So let's go into the helper object. We're going to click pick. And there's our driver door helper. You see that little guy there. It selects it in the real time. Click OK. Now when we move this, it's rotating around the right point, but of course the wrong direction. So we can go back to our little settings here, add a negative, and there we are. So we have a door opening a little bit too far. So what I'm doing now is just going to set the time to the end of the little chunk of animation here, and then I will use, one little thing I want to do. It's probably a little hard to see see what's going on, so I'm just going to darken that paint a little bit there for you. All right. So all I need to do now is just tune this little degrees here. So maybe we only want negative. Let's just do 45. One cool thing that most people don't know about. Let's say you have negative 90 in there. You can go and do little math operations divided by 2, and now we have negative 45. Times pi, and you get that. So let's just do negative 45. And that's the case for most value inputs. You can actually do little math operations. Okay, relevant question here that I can take a sidestep onto is, if we didn't add the cube ahead of time, can we actually add anything as a helper in KeyShot? And that you can actually do. So we've got this nice animation. So let me quickly just add one little thing here. I'm going to make the rest of the door open with this, and then we'll play with a little customizing of helper objects, because that is a cool thing we can do. It doesn't have to all be prepared ahead of time. So all right, so we have this left door interior. So you have a couple of options. You could, of course, right-click, add another rotation animation, and match up the settings. But that's the amateur way to do it. So let's go find our animation here. I'm going to rename it first for organizational purposes. Driver door. All right, there's our animation. Right-click. First step is to copy that, and now we can go around and paste it to the other part. So there's now 2 options to paste it. If I paste it with the simple paste animation operation, you will then get a second animation that is separate from the original, and those can be tweaked slightly from each other. So if I just paste, I now have 2 animations, driver door and driver door 2. That works, and what it allows me to do now is select that driver door 2, and if for some reason I need it to be slightly different, I can make it slightly different. So that's one option. Another option is, we'll just do the whole process again. So we, again, copy the original animation, find what you want to animate, right-click, paste linked animation. Now, we still only have 1 animation, so it's a little bit better for organization, and as we modify the degrees here, they move together because they're sourcing from the same animation. So that's a very nice way to do that, to keep that organized. All right, and they're both using that same helper object, so we're all good on that. So let's take a look real quick at kind of using some customizable helper objects. So what I want to do is import another object. Let's just import this sphere.obj. You all have these models in your KeyShot 3 resources/models folder. I'm going to add the scene, and I'm going to set the coordinates to automatic, and Y up is fine. All right, so there's our nice cube, a little bit big. So let's do a nice little feature here. You can right-click on a model, and you can say collapse all. So that kind of just fixes all that. All right, so we have a sphere, and of course I can scale that down just to about there. We'll leave it big so it's easy to see for you all. Now, I can leave that exactly where it is, click my animation. Actually, let's move it a little bit. So I'm going to right-click, move object, I'm going to move it over here just to exaggerate the effect. Click this animation we have, the driver door animation. Click pick helper object. Select my new sphere. We can select either level. I'm just going to go to the bottom level there. Now let's look at our motion. All right, there you go. So now that's using that sphere's position. Now let's see what happens. Let's experiment a little bit. I'm going to move this object now. I'm going to move this up. There it goes. And let's just try to move it into place. So kind of Just going to slam it into the side of the car there, sort of like that. Let's see what it's doing now. See, what it's doing is actually dynamically updating its position, its pivot point, based on the position of that sphere. Can continue to move it. You move it this way. Look at that. Updates when we confirm the movement. And of course, we don't have to always have this sphere sticking out of the side of the car. We can just hide that, and it still is used as the pivot point. I can actually even right-click on it here and say Move, and continue to move it without having to see it, and that door's animation will update. So if you absolutely must have customizable pivot points that you didn't set in the modeling software, then you can do it with just any old model. Doesn't have to be a sphere either. We actually made it a point to not give you a completely free pivot point manipulator. It's something we might do in the future, but in designing this animation system, I was drawing on experience from another animation system, and it kind of defaulted the user into trying to customize the pivot point, and it just isn't right. It's not a good way to work. It's better to think ahead while you're modeling, if at all possible. Think ahead while you're modeling for animation. I understand a lot of our customers, someone makes the model and then you're kind of given the model to render, or render an image or render an animation. So that becomes a little less realistic. But so in that case, if you're forced to customize, you can do it with a separate model. All right, let's just set it back to my little cube, though, since that's in the correct spot. All right, cool. Now, I'm going to use the copy animation. So I'm going to copy, and now I'm going to go over to the right door. And right door, instead of pasting linked, I'm going to just paste. Okay. So this is my right door animation now. Let's actually put door. All right, so there's the right door with the animation there. And now I need to change the helper object, because you can see what it's doing now is rotating it's linked up in terms of movement with the left door. So we need it to go the other way, and we need it to use a different helper object. So we're going to click Pick Helper. We're going to click the other cube. And now it's at least going around the right point, and we just need to remove the negative from the value. And then to get the interior, we just need to copy the right door animation, select the interior, and paste linked. So now we have just 2 animations to open our doors. It's pretty nice and simple. So now let's say we want to close our door. We don't have to go through that whole process again. We just have to right-click on an animation and select Mirror. Right-click on the other one and select Mirror. And now we have mirrors of our animation. Let's say you want it to continually open and close. You can then just duplicate those animations over and over again. You can also, to organize, we can right-click, add these animations to folder. So let's say open doors, close doors. So these features are a little bit hidden in the right-click. We definitely have plans to develop a little UI for the timeline so that you see these, but while they were while we were working out the kinks with exactly what they should do, kind of left them hidden, didn't draw too much attention. But they're about ready for prime time, so we will develop that further. All right. So now that we have these things added to folders, again, we just right-click on them, say Add to Folder. We could then make a whole selection of this and add these to a folder, so you have 2 folders within a folder. The nice thing about folders is you can just grab the folder and it moves everything with it. You can also stretch the folder out, and it stretches the animations within the folder. You can still move the animations within the folder separately, and you can see how that modifies the overall length of the folder. So there you go. These folders are a nice little tool there. If you need to delete an animation from a folder, just select it from within the folder and delete it. And that will, so now we only have one door closing, the other one stays open. Okay. So now a similar process can be used to animate the wheels turning, but it's going to be slightly different because there's a little nuance there that we're going to have to take into account, and that's going to be the brake caliper. But let's take a look at what we have in terms of the model. So I'm just selecting a part here, then we see, let's see here, we have the whole wheels group there, so that's everything. Then we have that wheel, entire and everything, and then we have this one, and then there's a brakes subpart there. So let's just start with the front left here. So I'm going to right click, add rotation. I know it needs to be around the Y for this file. And it's going to definitely need to be less than 90. Let's just do only 25 degrees. Okay, so that little rotation there is pretty good. Now we need to get the actual rotor spinning with that, rotating with it. So I'm going to say this is my. There's actually something very cool we can do here. I don't even need to make separate animations for both sides for both wheels on the front here. All I need to do is say this is going to be, turn right, or where the other left. I'll figure those out someday. And I can actually copy that, and I definitely need to put it on my rotor here. So let's find our rotor. That's going to be this one here. So that's my front left rotor. And I'm going to paste a link. Okay, so now my rotor moves with my front left wheel there. But the cool trick here is I don't have to go over to the other side and make new ones, make new animations. I can actually just link it up with this one. I'll explain why that works for this and not the doors in a second here. So let's find our group. So that's, I believe, my correct wheel there. Sometimes I like to just toggle the visibility of a part on and off to just completely confirm that it's the right selection. Of course, you have the outline, but never be too sure. So now I'm going to paste this turn left animation, and you see it actually works immediately. Let me hide the fenders here. And let's get rid of the wells. All right. So we see we're moving correctly right out of the gate with one single animation. That's pretty cool. And the reason that works is because with these wheels, with any wheels typically, you don't have to set a helper object because the wheels are perfectly sort of cylindrical. And so the center can be, the helper object can be set to self, and center is used, and that means each part that this animation has been pasted onto looks at itself as the center point for the rotation. So instead of kind of rotating around a single point, each part gets its own center point. Of course, if we were to set that to origin, they would kind of rotate together like that. So in the case of wheels, you can get away with steering basically with a single animation. And let's just get that on the right rotor as well. And now we have our rotors and front wheels turning. All right. Now we have to get those calipers turning now. So we need the calipers to follow this motion. But the problem is if I just select a caliper, so we find front right caliper and I paste and linked, thinking it worked for everything else, it should work for this. The problem is actually the same reason it works for the two separate sides, the two separate wheels, is the reason it doesn't work for the caliper, and that's because it's looking at the caliper's own little center point. So what we want to do is, so I just tried pasting a linked animation onto that caliper, and you can see it kind of does rotate, but it isn't correct. It's rotating around itself. So I'm going to delete that from the, so I'm going to unlink it, just to make sure it doesn't delete the rest of them. I'm going to unlink that animation from the caliper, and I'm going to delete that one. That way it leaves my wheels unaffected. There we are. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to right-click, I'm going to paste animation, not a linked animation, and we'll call this, so I'm going to just turn left, this is the right cal. All right, so now it's still incorrect. We need to give this caliper a helper object. So I'm going to select that little animation there, click pick, and I can actually pick the I can pick like any of these things that are kind of perfectly round. So that could be the rotor, could be the wheel itself. Doesn't actually matter. So let's just look here. We have, I believe they're under here. Wheels, tires, brakes. Okay, so there's my rotors, front left rotor, front right rotor. So we should be able to click that. Okay, I didn't like that. Let's go down to a sub-level here. Try that one there. Okay. So just what happened there that made it kind of jump out was because I selected a group of parts, and that group of parts can have transforms that kind of confuse the helper object. So you'll notice I typically like to go and pick the lowest level, the lowest part level, so nothing with subparts as helper objects. I think that it's just a generally safer option. All right, so that got us rotating around the right point. Now we just need to quickly do the same thing to the other side here. So we're going to make sure we have the right animation or the correct animation copied. We're going to select the caliper, front left caliper. We're going to paste the animation, not a linked animation, and we're going to rename this turn left, left cal. And we just need to give this a helper object. So we're going to go to Viper, exterior, wheels, brakes, left rotor, and just find one of the things that is, has the right sort of center point. Should be in here somewhere. There's one. All right, there we go. And now that caliper moves with it. Okay, so that's pretty cool. And let's do one little other thing here. Let's find our wheel. Okay, so we'll just look at this one first. So let's say we want to just make it look, make it spin, add a rotation. We'll call this spin. Okay, let's look at what that's doing. Not the correct axis. Y is not going to be correct. Z is going to be correct for this, for what we're trying to do here. So now it's spinning while steering, and spin can of course be increased here a little bit. Okay. Let's just bring that back down. All right. So there's our little spin, and I can take spin, copy it, and drop it on all the other parts that need it. So let's drop it on this one here, paste linked, and now that'll spin correctly as well. Can even go over to the back wheels and use that same animation. So the point here is I don't have to use a bunch of different animations to get everything moving the way I want it. I can actually use a lot of linked animations to get the right motion. All right, so there's my spinning, steering, doors opening, calipers moving, all sorts of good stuff happening. So I know that was probably kind of a lot to absorb, but of course we're recording this. It'll be posted online, and if you're trying to do anything similar to this, and of course not everyone is rendering cars, but there's a lot of similarities in opening a cell phone or any of that kind of stuff. All right, let's look at what we have here. going to go out of performance mode. And the next thing we're going to get into is lighting. So we're going to use the HDR editor. We're going to do some cool stuff. So before I do that, let me just take a peek at your questions. All right. Okay, so we have a question about changing the motion of the door swing from linear to a better ease in, ease out. And then you want to be able to modify the curve. So you have some options. We don't have a curve editor for you. You know, we understand the value of a curve editor that you would get in Maya or After Effects or something like that. But you know, as we're still relatively new to the animation thing, we're trying to kind of do what we did with still image rendering, which is keep it just absolute bare bones simple. So you can control ease. So if we just, let's find an animation here. We have right door, let's do driver door. And you have right here under time settings, motion ease. So we can go to ease in, ease out, and you get a little preview of what that kind of ease looks like. So ease in, ease out accelerates, you know, into the motion and decelerates out of the motion. All right, so now that'll open a lot more smoothly. And of course, you're going to want to use a lot of ease if you really want natural motion, because nothing happens very linear in real life. And we'll just do that here as well. So since we don't have a curve editor, you're limited to linear, ease in, ease out, and both. So if you wanted to, you know, accelerate and then stop linear, you can do that. But of course, most of the time you'll probably just throw ease in, ease out on there. So that's where that is. Okay, in regards to helper objects, can you not pivot at an angle? You can combine animations to make an angled sort of pivot. You can definitely combine animations, and you can also retain your local axis system. So let's say we had a part that had been rotated in Maya to get it into place. That thing's local axis will actually be tilted. So you can then rotate around those tilted axes. I know that might have been not a full answer, but it's something that is a little more specific to certain models and things. So, you know, if you have more, if you're having a problem with that scenario, we might be able to help through support. Okay, let's look at what else we have here. More obviously, highlighted bar would be good. Agreed. All right. All right, let's see. Can I animate the size of primitive shape? Okay, so there's no size animation. So scale animation is something that we'll probably add in KeyShot 4. So right now you definitely cannot animate the size of an object. And let's look at what else we have here. Inverse polarity button. An inverse polarity button to just kind of flip values is definitely something we should do. So I'll make sure it's considered for KeyShot 4. Okay, and someone that joined a little bit late and is wondering what level of KeyShot this is. This is, of course, KeyShot with animation, but it's also KeyShot Pro. And KeyShot Pro, so animation can be added to KeyShot Standard and KeyShot Pro. It's actually kind of a separate add-on. And in terms of, I believe material templates are a Pro-only feature. So when all the stuff we were showing on material templates, I believe is a Pro-only feature, unless I am wrong about that. You know, I'm not in sales, so I'd give everyone all the features, and you know, but not up to me. All right, let's take a look here. All right, so let's get into some lighting. Actually, one quick question about the helper object thing. So you're saying, you know, if you're using the cylinder as a helper object, is the axis line retained if the cylinder is tilted? And actually, it is not currently. This is a what it does now, it tries to keep it very simple. It uses the center point of your cylinder as the center point of the rotation, but it actually retains the part that's being animated. It retains that part's axes. So if you're setting your animated, your rotation animation to local mode, if that part is tilted or it has tilted axes, it'll retain that. But the cylinder, this is something we'll need to expand on in the future. But yeah, the cylinder won't. You can tilt the cylinder all day, and it's still all it's going to provide to the animation is a center point. Okay. So we can, if you have more questions about the animation stuff, helper object stuff, material templates, go ahead and throw them in there. I'm going to get into some lighting here for the last little while, and we can run a little long if you want to hang out. Yeah, I'll revisit the rest of the questions at the end. All right, so let's not use our little file there. We'll start with a more complete file. Now, so we have this HDR editor that we've created, and its main focus going into designing it, what we wanted was we didn't want to create a new HDR Light Studio. Basically, those of you that are familiar with that, it's a really, really great tool for creating studio lighting. So we didn't want to, we weren't looking to go head-to-head with them on that. We wanted to give, our users something just helpful for what they already have, which is pre-made environments. Making the environments you already have more useful it was kind of our goal, was the motive there. So, for example, there's an environment that's been in KeyShot for a while now, since I believe version 2, and it's this one here. So this environment. Let me zero out my environment settings here to make sure we're at the defaults. Okay, so this is basically what this environment looks like right out of the box. And honestly, I've never, until we had the HDR editor, been able to get this environment to look good for anything. It's got too much contrast. It's just too harsh. You have all this light just blasting from over here, and you have all this dark area. It's just not very good. But with the HDR editor, that can be fixed. So let's undertake that process. And what I want to do to show this is, the thing about lighting is it's very specific to your camera angle. I could do some simple things to even this out so that it looks good overall. But if I'm really trying to create an image, I want to have either a blank background, and I want to set my camera angle, and then work from there. Kind of lock in my camera angle, save that, and then work with the lighting so that it hits just where I want it, based on that camera angle, because of course the light has to hit the surface and bounce into the camera. You can't get the same lighting from every camera angle. It's just not possible. So in this case, with this environment, we have a backplate, this one here, that we can use to kind of set an angle and set a scene. If we compare, if I hit E, it goes back to the environment background. And a lot of times the environment background isn't what you want, especially for a nice high-res still image, because it's got, it's not high enough resolution. It looks a little fuzzy. It's really only good for the lighting environment. And good point from Richard S. here. Let you guys know that the editor is a pro-only feature as well. So we are using a pro feature here. Okay, so let's go back to our backplate. And this backplate, if I hover over it, you see it says at the very end of it 46 millimeters. That means the lens supposedly was 46 millimeters when it was shot. And this was shot on a full frame camera, the Canon 5D, so that should mean, our focal length here in KeyShot is equivalent to, a full 35 millimeter sensor based focal length. So if I dial in 46 here, we should be matched up to the camera. All right, let's see if that seems to be true. So the only problem is this backplate might have been cropped, which would make, if it was cropped, it would make the effective focal length actually longer. So we'll just kind of see what we have. It looks like it matches up pretty nicely. I might try to tune it more if it was a real final image, but that's going to be good enough. Okay, so I have my camera angle. We're gonna go with that. I'm gonna save that. That's my camera 9. So we'll remember we can always go back. A nice little 3.2 feature here is if you have saved your camera and then you even nudged your camera off of its saved position by even a pixel, it marks the active camera as camera 9 unsaved. And I can then expand my list and go back to camera 9. So if it says unsaved there, you know you're in a camera angle that isn't saved. So it's going to be hard to get back to if you're trying to create masks or layers or anything like that. You want to make sure you're in a saved camera. So there we are with my camera. And so the next step for this scene is I want to at least basically match up the rotation of the lighting. So you see like the shadows shooting off across the car here, but if we look at a reference point, these little, whatever these are, their shadows are kind of shooting off the other way. So I'm going to use the E and B hotkeys, so E as in environment and B as in backplate, to toggle between my environment background and my backplate background. By going to the environment, I can then kind of line up reference points here. So I'm holding down Control, left-clicking, and dragging to rotate my environment. And you can actually see those little things that are in my backplate. They're right along here. So I know if I kind of get them parallel with the car, we're going to be pretty close to matched up. So that's looking good. And you might also notice that this isn't how your environments typically look. Environments usually look like this, where when you move around with the camera, it kind of looks like your model's floating above the ground, and what you see under the car is constantly changing. But if you hit the G key, G as in ground, it kind of smashes the bottom half of the environment up to the ground level so that it kind of plants the car, which kind of helps. Of course, environments are spherical, so it creates a strange distortion effect. But we're using a backplate anyway, so we don't care about that. All right, let's make sure we go back to camera 9 here. There we are. All right, so that's our camera angle, and we have our lighting rotated. And we can really see the problems with this lighting environment. Like, yes, there is a lot more light in the environment hitting from here, but it's not quite as much contrast in the backplate as we're seeing on the car. We're just getting blasted with light on this side. We have just nothing happening on the front, and along the top it just goes dead. So we're going to light that differently. I'm going to close this, give us some space to work. Project, environment, edit, Lexion KeyShot HDR editor. There we are. So that opens up with your current environment as the background. Then we can go in and start adding pins and making other adjustments. Let's say we didn't like the color cast onto this car. Well, we can just remove it. You can see the effect by removing saturation, especially if I have my environment showing here. Again, using the E key, here's our saturation effect. So I might just dial it back just a little bit. So 0.5 is the default, right about here. I'm going to just go about halfway down. I think that looks nice. That's going to make the paint show a little more neutral. It's not going to get a color cast. So if you need your materials to show exactly as the color that you picked, you might want to go in and just desaturate your environment to start. Let's bring back that backplate. There we are. Now I could kind of go the other way, of course. So if I wanted to colorize the environment, I could always do that. So I can enable colorize, pick some crazy color, and then it'll cast that color over the entire object. But I don't want that. Let's disable that. Then there's your brightness. So I might start here by bringing my brightness down overall to the point that it looks like we have the right kind of lighting on here, where it's not blown out. If we look at a value of 1, the default, the side of the car gets kind of blown out. The white paint just isn't it's just reading too bright. So we can kind of just nudge that down a little bit, maybe to about like 0.8. And this highlight, I know my environment's rotated pretty much perfectly, but this highlight just isn't doing it for me. So I'm going to take my Control key, hold that down, left click, and drag a little bit so that that highlight moves. And basically I just moved it in so that it's kind of hidden in this area rather than lighting up the side of the car far too much. And let's just go to a nice cool 7.75. Okay, so this is arguably a little bit too dark overall now, even on the side, which is fine. What we're going to do is even out all this lighting. So I've got my adjustments set in, and now I'm going to go do some pin action, which is where it's actually these pins are a lot of fun. So we're looking at our environment. We know this is kind of our brightest spot. That's what's creating the contrast that we have, because it's a lot of light coming from here and not much light coming from anywhere else. So the first thing I want to do is add a pin to the top of my environment. You see immediately that starts lighting up the car in the top a little bit. We get a highlight across the windshield. That's looking cool. But I'm not going to go quite to the very top. I'm going to bring it over this way a little bit so that it bounces across the windshield a little further in. And we also want to get a little bit of the very top of the car. So I'm also going to bring the radius up. Let's just move it this way. Okay, so we're getting a lot of light on top of the car now, which is pretty cool. I'm going to move it further up into the environment here, into the top of the environment, so we get kind of this fall off of dark light. Now this pin is set to not blend with the environment, which means that it's going to just kind of create this white effect or whatever color I have selected. So if I wanted a blue light, I can do that. But what might be more natural in this case, well, it's kind of a choice. You know, if I wanted to look like I went in there and added a big reflector that you don't see in the back plate, I could do that. But if I want it to look like there's just more light kind of coming from up there, I can then enable blend. And what that'll do is instead of adding a big white light, it will actually, it's almost as though you're dodging and burning light that exists in the environment already. So if I just bring this up here. Okay, let's let that res up for a second. So take note of what that looks like. I'm going to disable the pin. So look at the difference there. Enable it again. And you can just see how we even out the lighting. Without making it look like we actually added a light source, we just evened out lighting. Now if I want that to even blend a little bit nicer into the environment, I can increase the fall off so that we get a really soft edge on that lighting increase. And I can continue to move that around a little bit, like so. And now that I've increased the fall off, it has overall a little bit less intensity, so I can just bump that intensity back up. All right, let's compare here. So we have, that's with our pin enabled, disabled, goes dark. So you can really see the difference there. All right, let's leave that enabled. That's a nice effect. That really evens out, and that's a huge difference, I think. Now let's add another pin. I'm gonna try to get some light happening on the front here. So I'm gonna bring that kind of over here. Sort of like there. And I can either go more fall off, just kind of soften it, and more brightness. And you see that's starting to light up that front. And again, I can make the choice of do I want blend or not. So right now we get this like added whiteness if we enable blend. You'll also notice, depending on what exists in the environment, you typically have to bump up the intensity more when blend's enabled. But again, blend kind of looks better here. It looks, it makes it look like it's like we're not adding light sources so much as we're just evening out what already exists. And I'm just nudging that around to get it kind of hitting where I want. You can also increase the size so it hits more. And also you'll notice there's a correlation, of course, between the radius and the brightness. If it's bigger, it's casting more light. Question there about, is this Pro only? This is Pro only, the HDR editor. Okay. All right, let's compare. So going to let it res up for a bit here. And then we'll disable it. So this light's affecting this part here. it's kind of centered right on this little fog lamp or whatever that is. If I disable it, notice how dark that front goes. So you kind of don't realize that it doesn't look good until it looks a lot better. Although it might just be a little bit bright. I was getting a little overzealous there with my brightness, I think. So that kind of evens it out nicely, maybe even a little less. Maybe we want the front to be a little bit darker than the rest of it. But you can see you have the capacity to really even out any lighting. Okay, so we have a question: can you distort the shape of the pin shape? With the circular, all you can do is change the size for now. With the rectangular pin, you can at least you can change width and height separately. So there's actually, let's just do, let's leave this one circular and use a rectangular pin to create a dramatic highlight across the side here. So I'm going to add a new pin. I'm going to set this one to rectangular. And you can see where that's hitting. It's hitting over here. We're going to move that over to the front of the car. Okay, so now we're casting a bunch of light along the side. So what I'm going to do is take the height of that pin down, so it creates like a little line of light, and I'm going to increase the width of it so it stretches out along the side of the car. And let's just bring up the brightness. Okay, that's obviously a little too much, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the brightness up, and then I'm going to bring the height way down. So I want just like a sliver of light hitting along the side of the car to create just a crazy highlight. Let's bring that back down a little bit. Maybe we'll bring this up so that it hits. One thing that can really help here, since I can either let it kind of res up and it gives me a better image of what it looks like, or I can just take my brightness all the way down on that environment. And now I can really focus on this one light here. So I kind of want to nudge it just below the window, just where it doesn't reflect in the window. You see if it's up here, it starts reflecting in this window. We don't want that. Let's go just a little below that. Okay, so you see that creates this, I think it's kind of cool at least, I don't know. And maybe we'll just increase the height a little bit so it's a little larger line, and decrease the brightness a little bit so that we get a little less brightness, of course. How about that? Okay. And then I'm going to bring my brightness in my environment back. That's going to bring the rest of the information back into the scene. That's looking pretty cool. But now, because I have this light kind of really, we kind of are back to just having too much light on the side. So what I'm going to do is take a pen, I'm going to add it, I'm going to move it over into this area where there's a bunch of that light, and I'm going to bring the brightness just down into the negative. And I'm going to blend it so that it's actually, this is like burning the light values. All right, let's look at the difference here. Enabled, disabled. So I can basically remove that whole light source by using a pen set to negative. Let's not go all the way to -1 though. We want a little light, a little something. Something like that. And to navigate here, all I have to do is just click on the center point of these pins. It might be a little hard to see mixed in with the environment there, but there's little center point icons that you can click and drag to move those around. All right, let's let that res up while I take a look at your questions. Okay, so asking when this will be up online. We'll get it up there. It just has to convert to the proper video format. It takes a little while, but it should be up within the next day or two. And that will be posted. I'll show you where this is going to be, right here under Resources, Webinars. This is where we post our webinars. And they also get posted on the forum. Webinars right here. And you can see the forum actually gets updated more quickly than the website because it's easier to update. So So the most recent one here is only the product rendering, but you'll see the render settings one is actually here already. Or, well, maybe it's not posted yet. I'll have to check into what happened with that one. But all right, let's see. So it'll get posted as soon as possible. Let's see what else you have here. Can you select the pin and nudge direction with arrows? You can't nudge right now, so that's something we can work on for you. Can I edit the KeyShot editor? So yeah, so you can actually HDR Light Studio and HDR Editor. They don't, they're not compatible in terms of like a light source you create in HDR Light Studio can be moved in our editor, but if you create an environment and save it out as an HDR in HDR Light Studio, in Light Maps HDR Light Studio, if you're using that environment, you can edit it further with our editor. And okay, so that's about all the questions. Of course, if I'm missing your question, absolutely contact us at support@luxion.com. And one of our newest employees here, Bruno, will be monitoring that to make sure we get all those answered promptly. So that's basically your lighting there. Oh, I ought to show you how to actually save this out and everything. So if this is your lighting and you're all happy with it, just go File, Save As, and you'll see this saves to the HDZ format. And I can actually save it right in here with the original. So this is what is this, industrial? Yeah, so I'm going to call this industrial edit. That's going to render out. One little tip there for you, if you have a slower computer and a high res HDR, you might want to pause KeyShot before doing the file save as operation, because this export here will just speed up if KeyShot is paused, because KeyShot uses all the CPU there. Okay, so now that that's saved, I can close that. And what it had to do there was export in the high res again, and that's because when you're working live in the HDR editor, it's giving just a very fast, low resolution preview of the lighting. But when you export it or save it, it outputs at full resolution, so you get nice crisp lighting and reflections. Now what I can do is so let's compare here. So we should have, so here's our edit, and here is our original. So here's the original. And so take note, take note, take note, and then here's the edit. So you can, this might be a little bit too evened out of lighting overall. You might want to keep some of the original, some more of the original kind of contrasty look, but it kind of shows the capacity to which you can really correct lighting issues. All right, so that's that is the basics of this webinar. Again, if you have any other questions, either hop on our forum and post up there. We're all very active on there. Contact support@luxion.com. Email me at jeff.mccartney@luxion.com if you want. Whatever you want to do, just get in touch and we're happy to help. And we will be in touch on what's up next for webinars. We should have one again next month. Thanks again for joining, and we will see you next time.